All right, afternoon recess now underway in that North Dakota courtroom. That is that state's case against Chad Issac, a veteran and chiropractor accused in a workplace massacre. We have just been hearing the testimony of BCI agent Matt Hyatt. I want to bring in now criminal defense attorney John Mobley joining us with analysis. So just listening to that later part of what's going on, the direct examination, the cross-examination, and then the redirect. What do you think that the highlights really were, particularly on redirect?
Well, I really think that the defense is doing a great job of what I like to call legal judo, and that's basically using the strength of the state's evidence against them. I mean, the linchpin of the state's case is really the physical evidence in this case that allegedly ties the defendant to the crime. But the defense did a great job really laying the foundation to argue that the police investigators botched the crime scene. And oftentimes what happens, and I've had it happen to me, is prosecutors get so caught up in the results of the examination of the physical evidence that ties the defendant to the crime that they don't really look at and evaluate how the crime scene was processed and how it was handled. And oftentimes you can find evidence and lay the foundation that the crime scene was botched, that the evidence was not handled properly, it was not collected properly, and based on that, you can't rely on reliability of the results and the interpretation of the results as how it pertains to the defendant and how it ties into the crime.
Yeah.
They did a great job of that, and I think the prosecutor acknowledges and through her redirect that the defense attorney is really scoring some points on cross-examination.
Yeah, you know, one of the things that we've been discussing as we've been covering this trial is that there is no apparent motive, and that's something that investigators have been very forthright with. And one of the law enforcement agents who was actually part of the investigation kind of discovered that this was a potential suspect after recognizing the vehicle. He said it was my chiropractor's vehicle, and this is how kind of this started to unravel, apparently. I want to play a clip from earlier today when we have testimony of Lieutenant John Cromer from the McLean County Sheriff's Office. Okay, we're going to get to that a little bit later. My apologies for that. So you know, you talked a little bit about some of the holes that you feel like the defense is really going to try to grasp onto. As we have been hearing from these various law enforcement agents, we have seen that the defense is really trying to kind of paint this picture as that these investigators have really done a sloppy job, that, you know, there were not every stone was left unturned, for instance, and that there are really some missing links. What do you think that the state really has to do to close the gaps and connect the dots?
Well, I think they've got a fairly strong case on the surface, but I mean, correct, the defense has done a great job of using some of the state's strength against them in that defense. I think that the lack of motive is particularly a little bit of an issue because this is a very brutal, graphic crime, horrendous murder that suggests that the perpetrator was acting out of revenge and rage and had some motive to make these people suffer. You know, as we all know in these types of cases, typically you see that when you have a jealous or jilted lover or maybe a business partner that took a major hit financially, something like that to motivate the person to really act in such a gruesome and violent manner. And the problem is, once again, is that the defendant in this case has no real connection to anyone there. So in using the strength of the state's case against them, you want to argue, you know, there's no really a motive for this person to commit a crime this heinous. There was no robbery involved. He didn't know anybody. So why would this individual commit such a horrendous crime? I think that's a problem. I also think that they've done a good job based on some of their cross-examination and other witnesses, you know, attacking the weight of the video evidence. You know, the state again wants to portray the defendant as somewhat of a stalker, someone who kind of really stalked his prey with the video footage. But I think they made the point that there are a lot of other cameras that were available that didn't show the defendant, and there are a lot of other locations of that building that camera footage did not show or did not cover. So there could have been other individuals that were present but did not appear on camera. And what they did in this case is they kind of rushed to judgment. And investigators often do that. They will take the path of least resistance and they start going down that road and don't want to turn around. But hey, the defendant's the one they saw on camera, so that's what they followed. And they just tried to make the evidence really kind of match him as opposed to eliminate and investigating other possibilities.
Yeah. And as in confirmation bias, which is exactly what the defense has been saying, that this is a case of confirmation bias, that investigators were under a lot of pressure to solve this case since it's so unusual to have a quadruple murder in North Dakota, and basically came up with a suspect and looked for evidence to confirm that it was that suspect, exactly what you're talking about. We also just want to let our viewers know that we're going to have much more on this from closing arguments with Vinnie Politan tonight, including reports from the ground. Coming up, a jury has now been seated in the trial against R&B singer R. Kelly. We'll have the latest details here on Court TV, your front row seat to justice.